Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Tax Administration Jamaica under fire for spending hundreds of millions of dollars on unoccupied properties. Children's Advocate examines potential ban on corporal punishment at all settings, including the home. And later in sports, parents being asked to fork out large sums for Carifta Aquatics Championship. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kerry-Ann Simpson. Here are the details. $371.8 million. That's how much Tax Administration Jamaica TAJ has spent to lease two properties which they have not yet occupied. The shocking details were revealed in a special audit report from the Auditor General tabled in Parliament yesterday. Andrea Chisholm has the details.
The two properties leased by the TAJ are in Greenvale, Manchester and Anotobe, St. Mary. As at August 2023, $356.8 million was paid to lease the Greenvale property and $15 million for the Anotobe property. TAJ did not receive written permission from the Commissioner of Lands before entering the lease agreement for the Anotobe property. The Auditor General pointed out that TAJ's standard operating procedures gives the Director sole discretion to identify and select properties for lease. However, it is not in keeping with best practices of accountability and transparency and should be aligned to government's policies and regulations. The recommendation is for the Director to identify suitable properties for lease, which would be shortlisted and then submitted to an independent committee for final selection. Given the amount of money already spent, the Auditor General urged the TAJ to quickly complete renovation works to reduce useless expenditure. Andrea Chisholm, TVJ News.
The government still has questions to answer about this budget. That's the position of the opposition PNP following yesterday's completion of the budget debate in Gordon House. The opposition spokesman on finance, Julian Robinson, says he and many Jamaicans are still no clearer on some critical issues.
I still believe the issues related to the GCT and raw foods, what he announced today should have been done before with the consultations with the farmers and other stakeholders, so that in the end people are prepared for the decision, whether the decision was something that you had to do or not. Now we're almost behind the ball trying to catch up. So, frankly, yes, he did address some issues, but I expected some more on that. He hasn't said anything on the census, which continues to be troublesome, and there's no clear pathway as to when that is going to be completed. So there's still some things which I raised which were not addressed in his closing.
Stakeholders at the retirement primary school in St. Elizabeth say they have now reached a boiling point with the Education Ministry after it failed to fulfill a promise to erect a perimeter fence around the institution as part of plans to improve security. Their concern follows an incident on Tuesday in which a man invaded the compound and threatened staff and students with a machete. Now, as you'll hear in this report, this is not the first run-in with the intruder.
No classes are in session at Retirement Primary School. Classes were dismissed early Tuesday after a machete-wielding man from the area invaded the school, hurling threats at teachers and students. Now, this wasn't his first time. Back in October 2022, the man who is said to be mentally ill entered the schoolyard and attacked then-Principal Anne-Marie Robinson Terrelong, chopping her on the head. She was hospitalized. The suspect was taken before the court for the attack, but the case was dismissed. No one was injured during Tuesday's incident, but the staff and students were left traumatized.
It's like he held them hostage with threatening words from the outside. So the students, the children, all the staff members were locked in the school, right, while he was on the outside.
Following the first incident, Education Minister Favour Williams announced that the school would be given the highest priority for the erection of perimeter fencing and a security guard would be employed. But to date, nothing.
We were promised fencing, we were promised security. We had a security there for a couple of months. Sad to say, he wasn't being paid. So the school had to foot the bill and he signed on a contract in order to pay back the school. We couldn't afford it after a while. So the young man was frustrated. He wasn't paid. So he left.
Board Chairman Herman Samuels says frightened parents are pulling their children out of school.
Because the parents said, if the school don't fence and the security is there, we cannot keep our children there because the young man will, at any time, will come back in the community. And they are right, he's there.
He's accusing the ministry of dragging their feet on the issue.
A year and 6 months? That's a long time. That's a long time. That's too long. That's too long.
The Education Ministry has since scheduled a meeting with the school's administration to discuss a way forward. Amoy Harriet, TVJ News.
April 30 will be celebrated as International Day to End Corporal Punishment. In keeping with global alliances, children's advocate Diane Gordon Harrison added her voice to the call for a ban to eradicate violence against children in all areas. She was a guest on TVJ's Smile Jamaica morning program today. The National Violence Prevention Commission is pushing for all forms of corporal punishment against children in all settings, including the home, to be banned. Diane Gordon Harrison is children's advocate.
Corporal punishment is in fact recognized by the United Nations and a number of other organizations globally as being a part of what is chronic violence that is practiced against children. Now, if you look at some of the acts that qualify as corporal punishment, it may surprise you. So it's not just the extreme beatings of a child, but it includes any beating, any slapping, however mild, any pinching, any kind of physical contact with the child, however mild, is considered corporal punishment and is considered an act of violence.
She says based on studies, there's documented evidence that corporal punishment causes psychological and traumatic baggage on children. It is why she says the proposed ban will relook at how children are engaged, not just in school or facilities that house children, but also in the home.
While it is important that we join the call and we push for the absence of violent kind of interaction with children, including corporal punishment, I think that hand in hand with that must be a very robust and comprehensive public education program and strategies that are executed at the community level that will give parents workable options, alternatives that will make them feel as if they still have the responsibility, which they do, to guide and discipline their children.
She added that the ban will be parallel to what is happening at the community level. In the meantime, the children's advocate says she's confident that once the issue is fleshed out at the community level, there will be significant transformation at the national level. An appeal is being made for the Education Ministry to introduce more technologically advanced programs in secondary schools. The call comes from students of the York Castle High School who recently won the 2024 NCB Foundation Robotics Championship. The students say as global technology expands and reshapes economies, Jamaica's education system needs to evolve with it.
Careers nowadays will be tilted more towards advancing in technology, whereas it comes down to programmers, mechanical engineers, robotics engineers, so on and so forth. Where we're at right now, we have to look on more of the sense of the pros, because robots are taking over from everything from drones to recording videos for people, from self-drivable cars.
With computer engineering, it is this computer, and computers are the future. It's like it will help us as a society to grow more.
Principal of York Castle High, Raymond Treasure, also shares the same sentiment.
Yes, because artificial intelligence is the way forward now. People are moving away from manual labor or even manual equipment, These days you program equipment to do the work, and this is what these young people are doing. They're adding their computer knowledge to their industrial technology curriculum.
It's time for a break. Stay with us. The Midday News. The government has announced plans to further enhance the country's bilateral relationship with South Africa. Jamaica welcomed South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation for a 4-day visit, where she co-chaired a hybrid CARICOM South Africa ministerial meeting with the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Details in this report.
Jamaica and South Africa are celebrating 30 years of diplomatic relations. To commemorate the milestone, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Grace Naledi Mandisa Pandor, recently visited the island to engage in discussions with the government and civil society. Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, says a number of issues stand to be addressed through the bilateral relationship.
I hope it is clear, Minister Pandor, that our unwavering solidarity with the people of South Africa provides the rock-solid platform on which we are continuing to build. In this context, we are pleased that we will shortly proceed to further engage on our bilateral relations. I look forward to our discussions while anticipating tangible outcomes on the various agenda items relating to cooperation in sports, tourism and health, as well as exchanges on Haiti, the 9th Pan-African Congress, climate change and UN reform.
Other CARICOM countries will also benefit.
As small island states, CARICOM also raised its need for support in advocacy and of its positions regarding climate change, the reform of global governance structures, and particularly those of international financial institutions. As a member of the Group of 20, the G20, and the BRICS grouping, South Africa is a trusted and effective voice for the interests of the Caribbean.
Both ministers reviewed new areas for cooperation in education, healthcare innovation, technological advancement, and agricultural development for both countries.
Importantly, during the inaugural session of our political consultations, our countries agreed to strengthen cooperation through the African Union CARICOM partnership and South-South cooperation through our work as members of the Non-Aligned Movement and the Group of 77, plus China, with the intent of advancing the development agenda of the South and advancing global governance reforms, which both countries agree are extremely important.
Amoy Harriet, TVJ News.
It's now time for the Business Minute.
Visa and MasterCard have agreed to settle a decades-long antitrust case filed by merchants. The $30 billion settlement would lower U.S. merchant fees over 5 years. Swipe fees cost them up to 4% of the total transaction a customer makes. This agreement could lower those fees by at least 0.4 percentage points for a minimum of 3 years. Although similar fees are charged by financial institutions in Jamaica on behalf of Visa and MasterCard, it's not known if the settlement has any effect on what happens in Jamaica. Both Visa and MasterCard say access to credit will not be affected. Further afield, with Easter less than a week away, consumer spending across the United States is expected to top US $22 billion. According to the National Retail Federation, a total of $22.4 billion is expected to be spent this year. People celebrating are predicted to spend an average of US $177. Food is expected to be the highest spending category, followed by clothing, then gifts. Meanwhile, the price of cocoa surged to an all-time high on Tuesday. This means customers could pay more for chocolate in stores. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Prince Moore.
And here's a preview of what's coming up in this evening's Health Report.
In this evening's Health Report, we look at pain management.
Mild pain, for example, would have a score of 1 to 4, and these patients can be offered paracetamol or even a painkiller called non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, which you have to be careful when you administer. For a pain of higher score, we may use narcotics such as morphine, injection, and derivatives of morphine.
That's the Health Report in Primetime News at 7. And now for today's Healthy Living tip. Learn deep breathing or meditation to help you relax. Reduce stresses in your life. Track your pain level and activities every day. And find ways to distract yourself from pain so you enjoy life more.
Time now for the top regional and international stories.
In the region, the Ministry of Health in Guyana on Tuesday confirmed an outbreak of chickenpox at a local prison, but denied claims by the opposition that nothing was being done to prevent the disease from spreading. There are 25 active cases and 28 recovering cases at the prison. The ministry says the prison staff has been evaluated and offered vaccination as they attempt to get the outbreak under control. On the international scene, a U.S. federal appeals court on Tuesday said a controversial Texas law that allows state officials to arrest and detain people they suspect of entering the country illegally will remain blocked. In a 2-1 vote, the court said the law, known as SB 4, will continue to be blocked while the court considers the larger question of whether it violates the U.S. Constitution. The court's decision caps off a messy few days in which SB 4 was caught in legal limbo after the Supreme Court allowed it to go into effect for a short period, only for the appeals court panel to put it back on hold hours later. And 5 people, including an infant, are dead after a 3-vehicle crash in Fayette County, Pennsylvania, Tuesday afternoon. All 5 deceased were traveling in a Honda Accord when the driver crossed into another lane and hit an oncoming truck. The occupants of the truck and the 3rd vehicle sustained minor injuries. And those are the top regional and international stories. I'm Amoy Harriet.
Thank you, Amoy. We head to a quick break. When we come back, we'll have